Hosting for the Dice Tower is generously provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff, in stock at coolstuffinc.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 472.
Attracting role players.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, we present a new board game biopsy segment, as well as a pair of games in the sweet spot. Plus, a picturesque location leads to a board gaming tale of horror. We attempt to answer 16 questions from the same letter writer, and we put forward our top 10 games to get role players into board gaming. I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the Gallstaff, Sorcerer of Light of board gaming, Tom Vassell.
Is this...
Gallstaff, you have entered a cave to the north. There is an elf here.
I cast Magic Missile.
There's nothing to attack here.
I'm attacking the darkness.
I love that sketch.
Who wants... What is it?
So much fun.
Is it Mountain Dew or
The
Cheetos?
Dead Alewives, it's called.
Oh,
Good stuff.
yes, that I always enjoyed that. They did the follow up too.
Yeah, I haven't heard the sequel.
Yeah, the sequel's pretty good. It's not as good as the first one, but it's still pretty good.
Okay.
So, folks, welcome to the Dice Tower. My name is Tom Vassell,
Hello, I'm Eric Summerer.
and it is August. It is hot all over the place.
And not
And-
here. It's actually starting to turn fall-like. There have been a couple of mornings around here that you start to feel it. Yeah, kids going back to school, we're heading into fall.
I guess I should rephrase that then. Kids are going back to school, which makes almost every parent in the world happy.
Yeah. Last day of camp is tomorrow for us.
Oh, you haven't even started school yet.
Not yet, on Monday. I guess by the time you hear this, we will have started school.
Yeah, it's just different. All the states have different school starting times and things.
It's crazy. I mean, we have friends in Indianapolis that have already been in school for almost a month. It's nuts.
That is weird, but I don't know. It is what it is. But it's certainly, for me, I always run my years by like from August to August. I'm like, oh, it's the beginning of the year.
You still have that school teacher mindset.
I do, but as a parent, you keep that mindset in place.
I guess.
Yeah, I just was actually in one of the local schools talking to them about running some board game events, possibly.
Nice.
Although I told them I could not do it on any regular thing, so it would have to be like a special event.
Right.
Type thing. So maybe we'll do that. And I've really been playing a lot of kids games lately. I just piles of them. I've been playing almost as many kids games as adults games. So that's a lot of fun. We're living in the time of year where there's just a abundance of pleasurable games to be played. I don't know how else to say it. You know, I go to my shelves and it's like, there's so many cool looking games here.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're disappointing, but it's not like we're like, all right, pick one. You
Right.
know? Now it's like, oh, we still haven't played that one yet. We still haven't played that one yet. You know,
Right.
there's just so many great games to be played yet.
True.
So I'm just having a blast doing that and trying out the new games. And the time between Gen Con and Christmas is like the best time for playing new games.
It really, I mean, there's a lot going on for sure.
Before we talk about games that we've been playing, we want to mention this is being posted in August, so you still have a few days left to enter our gigantic contest. And if you want to be involved in that contest, you need to go listen to episode 470, I think we talked about it, or 471 was it? 470. That's right, episode 470, because we don't want to repeat all the details. I will say this. When I say the word space, I mean an actual space on the keyboard.
Wait.
Not spelled out S-P-A-C-E.
Money space, money space.
So
man.
there is that. But we really do appreciate the feedback. Now, do realize that I cannot respond to every single email. I'm going through them all. It's going to take me a while, but we do appreciate all the feedback, and things like that are good and help me learn how to streamline and make the shows better.
Right.
So, unfortunately, if you're listening, your chances of winning are also rather low, I think.
We've gotten a number of entries, you're saying?
I believe we're up to 1,700 as the time of us recording this.
Wow.
Which is exciting, right?
Yeah, that's exciting. That may be the most entries we've had for a contest, is it?
It feels like it is. I think we'll break 2,000 by the time we end the contest. So that is, I don't believe we might have got 2,000 last year. I don't remember. It's still a lot of entries. Board Game Breakfast is the same number of entries, so it's interesting.
Neat.
So anyhow, we are still playing a lot of these new games we got at Gen Con. Let me jump in and talk about one of the hotter games there. I played this before Gen Con.
Do you want to talk about our event in Connecticut before we jump into games?
Thanks, Eric, for reminding me of something we talked about less than 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
Yes,
Goldfish.
folks, we are going to be in Manchester, Connecticut at the game store, The Portal. This is September, is it 16, 17, and 18?
It's the 15th through the 17th.
Also, what I was thinking.
Yes, Thursday evening, Friday during the day, Saturday during the day.
It's my first convention I will attend while being 40.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a week after my birthday, so. But we're going to be up there. We're going to do a live top 10. We're going to play our favorite games with you. Well, Sam's playing Blood Rage, not Twilight Imperium.
Right.
Sam and Z and me and Eric will be there. So we're doing a live top 10. We're going to run a game show for you all who show up there. We're just going to hang out and play games. So come on out. I know that there will be gaming on Thursday night. There will be gaming all day Friday. And on Saturday until we leave, which is around 3 o'clock or so.
Right.
So it's going to be a good time. We don't often get up to the north, except Eric. He does tend to live in that state.
I tend to, yes.
But for the rest of us, it's like, woohoo! And it's not cold there yet, so that will be
right. It hasn't gotten cold yet.
So I'm looking forward to that. And come on, if you're anywhere in that area, we hope to see you there.
Awesome.
Now can I talk about games?
Now you can talk about games. Go ahead.
Yes! All right. So there's a game I played at Dice Tower Con and stuff, but I wanted to play it some more before I went into it more, and that's The Others. This is from Eric Lang from Cool Mini or Not. And The Others, one player is playing one of the 7 deadly sins. It takes place in some quasi-modern times where like massive monsters are taking over things and tentacles are sprouting out of people. It's kind of a very dark theme. So in the game box you can be pride or sloth. And I think with all the add-ons and everything else from Cool Mini or Not, you can be the other 5 deadly sins. That's fine. But these are the 2 that are in the box. I only have what's in the base box. And then you also have some acolytes, and you have a control, and you have one massive avatar for pride or sloth, but that shows up like at a certain point during the game. And then you have some extra like people, like in the base game, you can have some corrupted hobos, corrupted nuns, or corrupted doctors.
Oh.
Yeah. So you have like these people running around. Now the good guys are playing heroes, and these heroes are all, there's a guy who can change back and forth to a wolf at whim. There's a girl with tentacles as arms. There are all kinds of heroes with special abilities.
Well, great.
And then you pick a mission. And each mission has you just do different things. You set up a map differently, and you might have to go rescue some people, or you might just have to go beat the bad guy a certain number of times. The good guys have a certain mission they're doing. So one person's playing the bad guy, and everyone else plays the heroes. And you are not playing a dungeon crawl here or anything. You are playing a straight out one against the other. Which I learned because I wanted to play the bad guy. And as playing the bad guy, my tendency is always to be like, I'm going to be a dungeon master. Just want to make sure everyone's having fun. And you can't do that here. You have to kind of wail on the good guys because it's kind of a balanced game. If you don't do that, they will win. And so it's one against the other. So it's actually not a very long game. I'd say 90 minutes is a good average for it. There's a lot of plastic miniatures. The good guys are running around. They have like a laser satellite that shoots down and blows up monsters sometimes. They find some cool weapons. The bad guy is going around starting fire and trying to corrupt them. There's a really cool corruption mechanism for each of the heroes where you can corrupt yourself deliberately, and it gives you like really strong powers and stuff. But if you go too far, that's bad. And so the game comes with 7 heroes, and all 7 heroes are used in every game. But let's say you're playing a 4-player game, so each person has a hero. If one of your heroes dies, you take one of the 3 left over. If you need to take a hero and there's none left, lights out.
Oh.
So I really enjoyed the game. I don't enjoy the theme so much. I mean, it's pretty dark. The stuff's kind of gruesome. I don't feel like it's too dark because when I'm playing the game, I almost forget that it's the theming. I'm just like I almost feel like I'm playing a D&D thing. I'm running monsters around.
Okay.
Playing against heroes and stuff. I don't even feel like I am Pride. Mm-hmm. So it's entertaining. It's a solid game for me, and I think a lot of people are going to like it. I probably won't hang on to my copy just because that theme doesn't really attract me. I don't necessarily know if I want it on my shelves per se, but I did enjoy it, and I would play it again. That's The Others from Cool Mini or Not.
First for me is a new game from Artipia Games and Stronghold Games. This is The Pursuit of Happiness. This is sort of
Wish. It came out of Essen last year.
It came out at Essen. Stronghold recently released this version. And they sort of bill this as a grown-up version of the game of life. You are going through your life. You start out with some childhood traits, go through one round of teen years, then a few adult years, then some old age turns, and at some point your character will die, and whoever has had the best life and has earned the most points, the most long-term happiness will win the game.
That's right. Now, you have short-term and long-term happiness.
Short-term and long-term happiness. So in a particular round, you will have an array of possible jobs. You'll have an array of activities you can do, stuff you can buy. You'll have possible relationships you can pick up. And you will essentially draft these cards. It's an action selection game, so you have a certain number of hourglass tokens, and you can acquire some resources, which you can then spend to acquire these jobs and relationships and stuff like that. Many of these things will have some sort of upkeep cost from year to year, or you can upgrade them to the point where they start giving you some upgrade or upkeep costs. But those upkeep costs always give you some sort of benefit. If any game could have the moniker spreadsheet game, this is probably one of them, because there's a lot of grids here that say if you pay this, you get this. If you spend this number of resources, you get this. Using these various cards, and some of these cards let you activate them and make them better, or do some sort of ability activity that churns more of these resources into, hopefully, short-term or long-term happiness. The short-term happiness sort of determines turn order. It makes it easier to buy things and advance projects. So you could pick up, like in my first turn, I decided to become a game designer. I picked up the card that said game designer. And the first level of this that only costs a few resources says, budding game designer. But then if I upgrade that and work my way through this project, I eventually won the Spiel des Jahres in my second turn of the game, which is great. It earns you all sorts of long-term happiness. And so you're grabbing these cards, advancing all of this stuff, and sort of creating a story as you work your way through this life. Now, there's also a mechanism of your health. And it's a sliding scale, and as you maybe take too many actions of a particular type, your stress increases, and you go down on this thing. And there's like bands, so there may be 3 spaces in the first band, and if you cross over to the next band, now you've lost one of your time markers for the next turn. And you have to find some way, like taking up jogging as an activity, to increase your health. If, however, you go into the higher band in the good direction, you take up jogging and you bump up to another band, now you have more time that you can spend on your stuff in subsequent rounds. It's rare. It's very difficult to get these good health markers. And then in the end, once you get into the old age sections, your stress for everyone goes up significantly. And if you ever go all the way off the stress track, you have died. And then you total up your scores. There's also some goals that get dealt randomly at the beginning of the game. So you may get bonuses if you got the most of a particular type of activity, or you have the highest level job. The jobs can be upgraded. You can either just jump into some amazing job, like a level 3 job, or you can work your way up in a social job from a level 1 to a level 2 to a level 3. It's cheaper to do that, but it takes more turns, more actions to do it. But you might get a cool bonus at the end of the game. Most long-term happiness wins the game. I found this to be fascinating. Lots of options. I mean, it's almost a dizzying array of options, but you feel like you are advancing projects. You have to sort of focus on things and spend your time wisely. And relationships take time often, or a job takes time, but you get some sort of benefit for doing so. You get money or resources. It was really a fun. This certainly played to my strengths and interests. It's a resource management game, action selection game, and then when you're all done, you have this story that you've created. Many years ago, Freedom and Freeze had a game called Funny Friends that tried to do this same thing, but it was a little wonky and a little raunchy. This, I think, is a wider appeal, a little more straightforward. I enjoyed this one more. This one might stick around for a while. The Pursuit of Happiness. Thumbs up.
Yeah, I don't know that the game itself is, like, amazing. I think the game is good, but the theme is so strong.
Yes.
That you just have fun playing through it. And I'll be like, I don't care. I'm going to die early, but I'm going to, win the Olympics while I'm at it. And they did a great job at putting a ton of cool hobbies and things you can do in there.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get caught up in those, and you'll make jokes about, that you married, or maybe you decide not to marry because that would just waste your time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can only have so many things in front of you, too. If you take too many cards in front of you, that starts to stress you out. If you have more than one relationship, that's going to stress you out. It really neat connections to the theme in here.
Yes, you can have multiple relationships, but the game strongly
punishes you for doing so.
That's a bad idea.
Yeah. But the benefits of the relationships are pretty good, so I could see how you might want to get more than one.
Now, Eric, I haven't seen the new version of the game. My one problem thematic-wise with the original game was that the jobs didn't have names. Everything else was, like, very specific. Like you mentioned, winning the Spiel des Jahres, you take up jogging, and then the jobs were like, science job.
Oh, no. You could be president, you could be film director, you could be...
Great.
The cards are, they're double-sided. So the benefits of a particular card are the same whether you flip it to one side or the other, but you can customize it. You could either be a film producer or a marketing CEO or something and flip to whichever one you want.
Okay, that was good. I'm glad that they fixed that then. All right, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's say that you have this great life and then it gets ruined by zombies attacking.
Oh.
Yes, that's right, another zombie game with a pretty terrible name, Hit Z Road. Now, here's the thing, though. As much as I dislike the game, the aesthetics and the look of Hit Z Road are amazing. The game actually looks like some terrible 1950s game that some kid, like, erased stuff and added zombies to it. And, like, he found some old decks of playing cards and is using them to make the cards in the game. And the pictures and the way the box is, it's really well put together. I get an A+ in presentation. Very, very happy with that. The game itself is actually a very simple game. You have a bunch of survivors that you are trying to get to the end of the game. And each turn you put out 4 sets of 2 cards that are dealt from this deck. And then you bid on these cards, and you're bidding tokens that you have. You have gas tokens, ammunition tokens, and adrenaline tokens. And you can bid these tokens to see who gets to pick their row first, because some rows are great. They give you, like, extra resources. Other rows you have to fight zombies. As the game goes by, the rows get worse and worse.
Right.
So after everyone bids, and then you see who picks which row, you go through your row. Sometimes you have to fight zombies, and then you roll dice. You get a chance to kill more zombies if you have ammunition and adrenaline. You can use gas tokens to run away from zombies. but you are going to get fewer tokens. You're going to run out of them as the game goes by. Your survivors are going to start getting killed, and if your last survivor dies, that's you. Well, you're out of the game.
Right.
So you want to try to survive, but it's a player elimination game, but you're talking about dying in the last 1 or 2 turns, unless you're really bad and unlucky. And then the people who survive, and hopefully some people did, will count up the points in the cards, because some of the cards are worth points when you go through them. And then they will get, whoever has most points wins the game. It was just really fun. I mean, It was fun sometimes to see like 2 survivors go up and like, 6 zombies, no way. And then they would survive by rolling really well. It was like some of those stand-up cheer moments.
Yeah.
And like the game even has like a token, like when you go through a card, take this token. You're like, well, why am I taking this token? Well, maybe 7 cards later it will say, hey, if you have this token, this good thing happens, or this bad thing happens.
Huh.
Now, after you play through the first time, you know what the tokens do.
Right.
But you still can be like, okay, I want to take that token because later on, hopefully I'll get the other card and it will match up well. Or that token, like the one token says, I don't remember who it was, like Billy gets bit. And later on, if Billy gets bit, one of your survivors goes away and turns into a zombie. So you might take that Billy gets bit token. You're like, okay, no big deal. Hopefully I won't be forced to take that card later on. The whole thing's pretty quick. I would say 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
It fits the same niche that maybe Run Fighter Die Zombies the game did. So a lot of fun. That is Hit Z Road.
Well, I have a dice rolling game as well. The King's Men is a dice rolling card playing.
Wait, is this a really bad movie?
Maybe. It's not based on it. It's not a licensed property or anything.
Okay, good, because I don't want a game based on that movie.
Okay. In The King's Men, you are trying to race to, I want to say it's 10 points, and there's a line of cards that march their way toward the castle. There's like 4 cards in the center, and these might be items that you can acquire that give you cool benefits. They might be quests you can go on that will earn you points, but they also might be perils, nasty monsters that march their way toward the castle. And if they ever get to the castle, they will prevent you from drawing cards, because you want to draw cards to go into your own hand to allow you to fight all of these things or acquire these quests, acquire the stuff. And if one marches to the end, well, they've prevented cards from being drawn. And if 2 get to the end, everyone loses. So you don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that you protect the castle, at least somewhat. It's semi-cooperative, but there can only be one winner. On your turn, you're going to get a certain number of dice. The dice, there's 3 different types of dice. There's green dice, yellow dice, red dice. I think the red dice are the cheapest. They're the least good. They have the least number of success symbols on them. You get 2 of those, and you get 1 yellow, 1 green. And then you can play cards from your hand to add more dice, improve the dice you have. You've also got money that you've acquired. In fact, you get a coin at the start of your turn. And you can spend those coins to upgrade the dice, add more dice, whatever. And then eventually, at some point, you commit to one of these cards in the center of the table, and you'll roll the dice, hoping for successes. You can save some of those dice back, maybe commit to a second card later in your turn. But anyway, you've committed to a card, and you roll the dice, and you hopefully get successes and defeat the card. And then acquire it, defeat it, get points for it, whatever. Now, your opponents also have cards that will affect your stuff, and they can often affect your stuff before you roll dice or after you roll dice. So you have to go through this process of, I commit to this card, and you have to go around the table and wait for everyone to pass. And if they play a card, well, then you can play a card in return. And continue around until everyone's passed. Then you roll the dice, and then everybody gets a chance again to play cards, and you can respond. And then maybe you've scored the card, or maybe you don't have that number of successes anymore, and you move on to the next player's turn. Each player's turn, also the front card in the row is going to go away, so things march forward pretty quickly. So if you let that peril sit there for too long, it's going to be a problem very soon. And it continues until one player has scored 10 points. I like the novelty of messing with the dice, improving the dice, sort of improving my odds to defeat a particular thing. But this whole everyone gets to respond to every action you do slows things down a lot. I would love to play it more freeform, like, here's what I'm going to do. Pause 1 second. Here's what I'm going to do. Pause 1 second. But turn order could matter. Like, if the guy to my right is going to spend a card to stop you, I'm not going to stop you. It has a little bit of a Kill Dr. Lucky feel to it.
Oh, I hate that.
Which I know Tom loves a whole lot. I feel like this is a near miss. I liked the messing with the dice, but it's almost hampered too much by the necessity, by the design, to allow everyone to respond to every move. And I just think it suffers because of that. The King's Men is a pass for me.
All right. Well, I'm going to continue to be on a very positive note here.
Good.
Let's talk about Energy Empire. Energy Empire is basically called Manhattan, the Manhattan Project Energy Empire. But it is not an expansion for Manhattan Project. It is a standalone game, and in fact, I think it's going to suffer because people are going to look at the box and think it's an expansion.
Ooh, that's a shame. So it's in the universe, but it's not an expansion.
Okay, but the universe for Manhattan Project is our universe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so like most games are in the universe of the Manhattan Project.
Right. But anyway, it has the same artwork and style, and it looks a lot. And it has a few of the same things, but in this game, which is, by the way, a 45-minute to an hour game, you are trying to score the most points, and you do so by, on your turn, placing a worker on the board or pulling all your workers off the board. That is one of the similarities with the Manhattan Project. And you can buy buildings, and if you put these buildings in front of you, when you put out a worker on the board, you can also put workers in your own buildings, which again is similar to Manhattan Project. Those are the two similarities. Now, you have workers, and you also have energy. Energy is like a worker, but it can't be placed out anywhere on its own, but you can put a worker with energy on places if you want to go to a spot someone else is. So if Eric puts one worker on by this building, and I want to go there too, I could put a worker in one energy. And then if Eric wants to go there again, he can put a worker in two energy.
Mm-hmm.
Energy can also be used to activate your buildings instead of a worker. So energy has a lot of uses. So this game is about, keeping some energy up when you are going to be going around the board and collecting different resources. There's iron and plastic and science and money, and you're going to be building buildings and things like that. But you're also going to be accumulating pollution as time goes by. So you have this little grid on your board that you have pollution, and one of the resources in this game that's very useful is oil. But when you get oil, you often will get pollution, and you're covering up this board with pollution. Whenever you pull workers off the board, you're going to be polluting more, or possibly not polluting more. And every once in a while, the game is going to run out of pollution tokens on a certain on a turn track, and you flip a card over, and players will score points depending on how non-polluted their areas are. So keeping your areas free of pollution can score you a lot of points during the course of the game. And then also special effects can happen. Also, when you pull your workers off the board, you get your workers back. So let's say you have 3 workers, you get your 3 workers back. Well, you get energy back, but you don't automatically get energy. You can spend oil tokens to take brown dice, or you might have bought dice earlier in the game. You can get clean energy, nuclear energy, and you have all these different dice. And you roll these dice, and that shows how much energy you get. And some dice give more energy than others. For example, nuclear gives the most energy. And oil gives a lot of energy. But then when you roll these dice, you look at the numbers on them, and the highest die will tell you if you get pollution or not. And you can get regular pollution or nuclear pollution, which is worse. But if you're clean die, you might be running some clean die. That might give you no pollution. So you're trying not to get pollution, but you're also trying to get this energy because it's very useful. And so you just go on for 6 rounds of the game doing this and spending time putting your workers on, pulling them off, activating buildings. And at the end of the game, you're going to get points for your buildings, for moving your token on the United Nations track, for the lack of pollution that you have, and just different places that you can get points, and the most points wins. And that's pretty much the game itself, but the game is really fun. You could try to keep your air completely clean, and that's a legitimate strategy, and you can pollute like all get out and just build and build and build and hope that wins, and that's also a legitimate strategy. And I like that. It feels it has a nice flow to it. Your turn is quick. It's the next person's turn. You always feel like you want to do more than you can. Mm-hmm. It's a good style worker placement game. Z says it's better than Manhattan Project. I'm not sure they should be compared per se. They're going to be, though.
Yeah.
But I also really do like it. I think I might like Manhattan Project better, but that is a longer, more involved game. And it has a few clunky parts. Like I've always thought that the airplane parts of Manhattan Project is a little clunky. But this game is streamlined and really good. I think it's going to be a hit. That is Energy Empire.
My last game to talk about, I think, is also really, really good, but I don't know if it's going to be a hit because it's so odd. It's one of the most unique games I've played in a while. It's called the Ravens of Thri Sahashri. Now, I'm going to spell that because it's really hard to spell. That's Thri and then Sahashri. This is a small box, 2-player asymmetrical game from Osprey Games that has a Japanese. It's originally a Japanese game. An anime
cooperative?
Theme. It is cooperative. One player plays Ren, who's a girl who is in a coma, and Feth, the other player, is trying to unlock her memories. Mechanically, this is 4 cards that are face down in front of the Ren player. And you are trying to figure out what those cards are and then put those colors into the array that you're building in the center of the table. Each round, Feth is going to draw a certain number of cards, and you can continue. It's got a little bit of a pressure luck aspect. You can keep drawing, but there are ravens in the deck, and if those come out, then those are going to start eating cards. If there's a raven of a particular color out, and you discard, say, blue cards, and there's a blue raven, the blue raven is going to eat those cards and possibly discard them at the end of the round. The game is played over 3 rounds, and you want to be able to make it through all 3 rounds and complete the final round, the final dream, in order to win that game. So Feth has drawn some cards, and then you have to place them in an array. So there's a little bit of a tile-laying aspect to this. The cards have quadrants that some are shaded and some are not, and you have to place them so that the shaded and unshaded areas match, and then it all forms one big array of cards. Once this has been done, then the Ren player grabs one of those cards and adds them to her array of cards, her poem, it's called. And there are numbers on these cards from 1 to 5. And the cards that are face down are also numbered. And Ren has to place them 7, 7, 7, 5 in her 4 columns of cards. And you can't move on to the next column until you've completed one. And so if you match the color of the face down card, you flip it up, which gives you some information but doesn't give you points at the end of the round. And so and Ren is not allowed to tell you what is underneath the cards. You have to sort of go from what she's taking from the array in the center and what she places in front of her. And hopefully, eventually, once you get to the end of the 7, 7, 7, 5, the only colors that are in the center are the same colors as the ones that are face down in front of Ren. If you've done that, you've succeeded in the round. However, the ravens may have eaten cards. You can also get rid of the ravens by playing combinations in the center that add up to 7. If you do that, then you can banish that color raven and get some score cards and other cool benefits. The cards themselves have benefits, and once they've been added to the poem, you can trigger those abilities to help mess with the array in the center and the columns and just learn things, do more stuff. There's a lot going on. It's confusing. In fact, it's difficult to even understand how this works until you lay it out and start working your way through it. If you succeed with round 1, you sort of reset. For round 2, you do it again. Round 3, you have to complete 1 row of the poem each turn, so the final round only lasts maybe 3 or 4 turns. If you succeed, there are 3 sealed envelopes in the box. And you open up an envelope if you've won the 3rd round. That makes the game more difficult. You then do it again, and if you manage to do the 3 rounds, complete the final turn, and open up envelope 3, you have won the game, and you get a Japanese-style RPG final, thanks for playing text adventure. unique. I mean, there is no other game like this. It is satisfying when you manage to work your way through this puzzle. Very puzzle-like, but it's got that push your luck element. It's got that tile-laying element. It's got the special powers of the cards. What do you give? What do you provide? What options do you allow the Ren player to have? What does she take in order to give you information and leave you options for powers for later? It's really deep for a one-deck card game. I was fascinated with this. Wanted to try it out, immediately wanted to play it again. The next night, wanted to play it again. I did not rest till we beat this game. We completed it. And you can certainly scale everything back to the beginning, just put everything back in the envelope, start again maybe with a new partner or switch places and try it again. It's a neat game. The Ravens of Thri Sahashri from Osprey Games. Big thumbs up from me.
Where did you get the game from?
This Osprey sent it.
I don't think this one's crossed my desk yet, but I'm really kind of intrigued by this.
Interesting.
Unless it came through and Z grabbed it, which seems like a distinct possibility.
I actually had misplaced it for a while. It's so small. I threw it in a bag, took it to game night, and then forgot I had it until somebody reminded that they were interested in it. And I said, "Oh man, I got to dig this thing out and try it out." And I'm glad I got it back out of the bag. Really neat game.
All right. Well, some great games that we talked about, except for The King's Men, which was a near miss, says Eric. So let's now jump to a new segment from one of our friends that we've met at like 1,800 conventions.
1,801.
Possibly. Board Game Biopsy.
Every game has a story, and this is one of them. Presenting Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
This time I want to talk about the many lives of a game invented by a giant of the gaming industry, the children's game Which Witch. You might not recognize the name Marvin Glass, but I'm sure you know his games. Mousetrap, Operation, Mystery Date, or Huck'em Sock'em Robots. While I could fill up several segments of Biography of a Board Game about Mr. Glass's creations, I want to start with his 1970s board game, Which Witch. Which Witch is a three-dimensional board game where players spin a dial to move their children-shaped pawns through a haunted house and its 4 rooms: the Spell Cell, Witchin' Kitchen, Vroom Room, and Bat's Ballroom. The players risk activating traps by a metal whammy ball, which rolls down the house's chimney. Players can also be turned into mice by drawing spell cards. The first player to reach the charmed circle at the top of the staircase wins. We don't know exactly which designer at Chicago-based Glass & Associates invented the game, but the game was a big hit for both Milton Bradley and UK publisher Dennis Fisher. A TV commercial featuring cackling witches and giggling children can be seen on YouTube. Which Witch isn't the best game ever made. It isn't even the best children's game ever made. But what makes it noteworthy is how many times the game has been reinvented both visually and gameplay-wise. When the game was released in Italy in 1972 as Castello Incantato, the players are now tourists, who can be turned into mice by a witch, a fairy, and a lightning bolt-throwing superhero. However, the art of the haunted house is much creepier than in the original. Red-eyed ghosts peek through rotting floorboards and emerge through broken windows. Dennis Fisher re-released the game in 1975 as New Haunted House. The game's art emphasized cavorting ghosts rather than witches. Cardboard standees replaced the plastic pawns, who now start outside the haunted house, while inside a sweeping broom is replaced by a falling knight statue. In 1985, the game was once again redesigned by Milton Bradley as Ghost Castle, the Haunted House of Horrors. The art in this version is much more sinister than any other, with a giant tree ready to eat the children and an executioner who guards the door with a swinging axe. A glow-in-the-dark skull replaced the whammy ball, and the players must close a coffin lid to finally put the ghost to rest. Players are no longer turned into mice, but are frightened into immobility by placing fright masks onto their pawns. A year later, Milton Bradley released yet another version as the Real Ghostbusters game, based on the cartoon of the same name. The players are now the 4 Ghostbusters who follow a slime trail through a haunted museum. They must capture ghosts and avoid being immobilized by Slimer before climbing to the roof to trap the skull-headed Baron Bones. In 2007, Goliath released the spiritual successor to Which Witch with the Scooby-Doo Haunted House 3D board game. Scooby-Doo and the gang explore a 2-story version of the board, loaded with new traps such as a dropping spiderweb, swinging mummy sarcophagus, and spring-loaded moose head. In 2012, Goliath released Ghost Castle, a closer adaptation of the original Which Witch concept. Besides reverting back to the Kids in a Haunted House theme, The traps received a significant upgrade. A full plastic tree swats at the players with its branches. A bearskin rug lunges at players. A knight statue swings its axe, and a massive bear trap waits to snap at unsuspecting players. I find Which Witch to be a fascinating example of the iterations that can happen to a game over the decades. With its 3D board and interactive mechanisms, Which Witch is a classic example of the intersection between board game and toy, which can be seen in later games such as Hero Quest, Star Wars Battle at Sarlacc's Pit, and 1313 Dead End Drive.
Until next time, this has been Biography of a Board Game with your host, Professor Scott Rogers.
And now, another tale of board gaming horror.
Oh my, that's horrific.
Gather round, children. My husband and I used to work at a resort high up in the mountains. It was so far from the nearest town that we didn't have any internet, often didn't have any signal for our cell phones, and all of the employees lived behind the resort to avoid hours and hours of commuting. With no Netflix to distract us, Brian and I played many two-player games those years, between hiking and fishing trips, of course. A couple of other people had some nerdy tendencies, but it was rare to get anyone to sit down with the kind of concentration needed to learn anything complicated. Social games were pretty popular, however, so one night we got a bright idea. At the time, we had a large fire circle at the top of a small hill, maybe a 7-minute walk from the employee cabins. It was through the woods, so you had to be shown where it was. People didn't just stumble upon it. The stars were bright and beautiful when you stepped away from the campfire, and the stone fire ring was large enough for some sizable fires. There were roughly constructed log benches around the circle, and many nights were spent singing, laughing, and playing music around that fire. Many of our friends there had already played werewolf during the winter, when the snow kept everyone inside. So how cool would it be to play werewolf under the full moon? How great would it be to play on top of a mountain, in the forest where you felt like you were the only people in the world? Brian and I are both somewhat quiet folks, so we got our friend Jason to drive up. He had a loud voice and had run dozens of werewolf games with highly distracted ski resort employees. The night was beautiful. At that elevation, it was a crisp 40 degrees, even in August. There were a few wispy, dark clouds, none of which blocked the moon. The moon was huge, and the fire was roaring. The friends were a little spacey, but tolerable. Jason explained the rules of the game for those that were new, and the game started off well. There were a few cries of, "Wait, who died?" and "I think Brian is the werewolf." "No, Brian just got killed by the werewolf." But the game was still holding together. People really seemed to be getting into it, even role-playing. Well, people were yelling, "Kill Kathy, she's a werewolf!" and "No, kill Monica, she's accusing Kathy." 3 shadows slowly approached from the far side of the hill, the side away from the resort and cabins. The noise around me became an indistinct roar as I saw the 3 silhouettes stop and consult with each other halfway behind a tree before continuing to approach the fire. No one but me seemed to notice the shadowy figures. My fear was put to rest when they walked out of the forest and greeted one of the guys. They were Will's friends from college. We explained that we were playing a game, but it was really easy to learn. Still, 2 decided to just watch, while the third, James, decided to play. My friends, more into rock climbing and trail running than card games, were somewhat distracted. James was a whole new type of space case. He didn't even seem to try to follow what was going on. Still, he survived until nearly the end of his first game. When there were only a handful of people left, it became obvious he was a werewolf. "Kill James!" the group of survivors roared. The vote happened. He was a dead man. "Now we see his role," Jason intoned, holding his hand out for James's card so he could hold it up dramatically, as he liked to do. James reached in his pocket and pulled out nothing. Jason asked again for the card, and James started looking languidly around the bench. It took 3 people with flashlights to find the card, which had somehow fallen behind the bench and gotten stuck between 2 rocks. I was not exactly thrilled with how my card game was being handled, but I decided to let it go. James was one of the last players to die, and soon we started the next round. James and his friends were talking through the whole thing. The group voted to hang him in the 3rd round, possibly out of pure irritation. Jason held his hand out for James's card, and again, no card was produced. Again, the people sitting next to him brought out their flashlights, but this time James didn't even pretend to help look. Minutes went by. I even looked in the campfire for the melted plastic of the sleeve, but it didn't show up. "It's all right," said James, casually, with a shrug and smile. I said, "It's my game, it's not all right." James said, "No, seriously, it's no big deal," acting as if I was ridiculous for being annoyed. He wasn't even sorry. I saw red. "You lost my card!" James said it again. "But it's no big deal. Let's play another round." I couldn't even reply with words. I just sat back down and growled. The funny thing is, if he'd said, "Oh no, I'm so sorry I lost your card," I most likely would have said, "Oh, it's okay, there are plenty of cards in this box. We really never used them all." Jason seethed. He spoke calmly, but as if he was speaking to a child. "You can't play another round. You lost a card. You're not paying any attention to this game, and it's her game, and she is mad at you." "Don't be so sarcastic, man," said James. "I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being condescending. That means I'm talking down to you," replied Jason. With that, the game broke up. People turned in their cards and resumed the normal campfire chit-chat. Someone started playing music. I hunched miserably on my bench, staring deeply into the fire with a look of pure hatred. Jason silently handed me my cards. Brian put them all back in the box for me and kept a hand on my shoulder as we walked back to our cabin. I never spoke to James again. I haven't played werewolf since.
That's a tale of sadness.
Man! That's a tale of infuriation. It's weird. It is this weird disconnect between people who see board and card games as like an $8 purchase at Toys R Us versus a hobby board game that's going to cost a lot more than that.
Yeah, but see, I don't care about that. That doesn't excuse that. I don't care if someone else has as $1. If it's not yours,
right?
If it's yours, do what you want. But if it's not yours, you treat it with respect.
It's the lack of remorse, really.
Maybe the guy was on drugs,
or otherwise, impaired. I could see that.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know all the things. It does sound like it would be fun to play werewolf around a fire.
The setting sounded fantastic.
It does. But it sounded like he was in trouble anyway. The people were like half-hearted into the game and not really knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate, but
Also, it's interesting to do that voice for a female protagonist.
I was thinking that as you were reading it, like, can Eric do a female voice?
Well, not like that.
I
don't know what I would. I think the narrator for Tale of Horror does not change regardless of gender. I'm putting my foot down right there.
Well, right. Well, you don't change regardless of culture either, or
right.
age, or anything.
Right.
So if a little girl writes one, you're reading it in that same voice.
It will still sound like this.
All right,
I
fine.
was playing with my other girlfriends.
Okay, anyway.
All right. Well, one of our listeners was really bored.
Yeah, he was.
And so he sent us 16 questions.
Oh, my goodness.
And so he wanted to ask interesting and enjoyable questions, good questions. So he asked us 16 questions for 2016. So we're going to answer those 16 questions in this show. Please realize that this may not happen often.
Yeah, no,
fact,
the one time probably.
If anyone shoots us 16 questions or something like that in the next 2 months, I'm just going to delete the email right out because I don't want this to turn into a thing. But I felt like doing it. Are you ready?
I'm ready. You want to go first?
And we'll both answer.
Okay. How much time do you spend each week filming and editing videos as compared to how much time you spend playing games?
Definitely spend more time filming and editing than playing games. Mm-hmm. But not always. Sometimes it's closer to 50-50. This week, I have a higher average of... this week I think I'm going to play more games. But that's just this week.
I'm probably close to even. I'll get one session of 5 hours or so of playing games, and then editing, recording podcasts ends up being about that for the week. So it's about even. You want me to read all of them?
I'll do this next. Question 2. Do you think there will be more major game company acquisitions in the near future? And do you believe that company consolidation is good for the hobby?
I think there definitely will be more. I couldn't tell you what because, I'm constantly surprised by the mergers that are announced.
Well, Upper Deck just bought Stoneblade.
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. In fact, this was the subject of my guest appearance on The Spiel recently. They recorded some stuff from Gen Con, and this was the subject of discussion. So if you want an in-depth discussion, check them out. They're good guys.
I don't think it's necessarily bad for the hobby. I mean, honestly, I think the hobby course corrects. If one company buys up other companies grow and, whatever.
Right.
It might not be great for those companies. Like, for example, the Asmodee, I'm noticing some dip in quality. Like the latest Ticket to Ride quality was down somewhat. So I'm hoping that that's not
like the physical quality?
Yeah, the trains are not as good quality as the other trains.
Really?
Yeah. So there's some of that stuff going on, and obviously they raise their price and do all kinds of stuff people don't like. But I think in the long run, that affects them. The hobby itself will grow and change and maneuver around this stuff. So, and will more stuff happen in the future? I can guarantee it will. I just don't know what.
Right. Do you recommend first-time game designers utilize sites like Unpub to help develop their games? Yes.
I recommend that first-time designers utilize every single possible tool in the universe to help develop their games. So if such a site exists, use it. You seem to be losing weight in your videos, Tom. Is there a secret you can share? It's the same secret that I would do for every aspect of my life, and that is just keep doing it. Like my reviews, I just kept doing reviews. Well, when I lost weight, I said I'm going to not eat as much food. That's a pretty good way to lose weight. I'm going to eat less food, and I'm going to eat more healthy, and I need to just keep doing it. And that's what I did.
It's an interesting turn of phrase, though. Is there a secret you can share? Because now that you've shared, it's not a secret.
It was never a secret anyway. Honestly, people are always like, I don't know how to lose weight or how to do this. It's really easy to lose weight. I mean, it's not like it's hard to figure out how to do it. I shouldn't say it's easy to lose weight. It's not like it's hard to figure out how to lose weight.
Right.
There's like a billion diets out there, but you need to stick to it. That's where it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Gen Con doesn't help.
Yeah, no. Sometimes an IP being slapped onto a game will draw fans into the hobby, but sometimes these games are very disappointing and misrepresent the hobby in frustrating ways, most notably perhaps in the awful Hunger Games board games. Do publishers seek out the IP first and then try to create a game? Or does the publisher take the designer's game to a rep from the IP parent company and pitch them on it? Or is there not an industry standard?
Well, first of all, I didn't think the Hunger Games were that bad. It honestly is different each time. Sometimes the game is done and they get the IP and they say, let's use this. Sometimes they'll slap an IP on an existing game. Sometimes they're like, design a game based on this IP.
Right. That's often the Hasbro model that we've heard from folks who have worked there, that they get, movies coming out and they need to design a game around it. They've gotten a little better at that. Maybe
Gale
adapting
Force 9
an existing
does it,
game.
and they do a good job at it.
Yeah. I get the impression that they design around the IP at Gale Force 9.
Right. They're given the IP, and then they design a game for it.
Right.
Right, and I think that's pretty cool. I prefer that, honestly, than you take a game and then go, hey, this would work really well with Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. And then try and shoehorn it in.
Tom and Eric, you are both great at getting your children involved with board gaming from a young age. What would you say are some of the best results that you have seen in their development that they have gained from gaming?
I've seen my son, my elder son, gain more patience from playing games. And it's neat to see well, I guess not neat. Neat isn't the word. Interesting to see the difference between him and his younger brother and their attention spans. Just one, due to age, but also because more playtime, more tabletop time has happened for the older child. And it's nice to see them finally playing games with each other that don't need to involve me. And so they're learning all of that stuff, taking turns and sharing and following the rules. And it's fun to actually have them playing by themselves without me needing to intervene at this age group.
Right. There's so many answers to this. It's nonsensical to even try to answer this in a sentence. So how about being a good loser? I think is a good one.
Still working on that one.
But I mean, that is an important skill. And I've seen my kids learn to say, hey, good job, congratulations. That's tough to do as a kid.
Yeah. Are there ever times that you need a vacation from gaming?
Yeah, but it's usually 24 hours and I'm ready to go back.
Yeah, maybe a short break. Although often the gaming for me is the vacation. If I've, been narrating for a week or had a lot of other stressful things going on, my release is getting to go to game night. Even though there is the pressure of having to get things reviewed and played and to the table. But the actual playing of the games is something I look forward to 95% of the time.
Masterclass is a company that gets industry professionals to teach their craft, usually in the arts. For example, James Patterson teaches writing, Christina Aguilera teaches singing, Kevin Spacey teaches acting, etc. This is not an endorsement, as I have never used or done a masterclass. If you get one board game designer to teach a masterclass, who would it be and why? And also,
I know Tom's answer.
No, you don't.
You don't?
Here's my answer. I'm going to go it. Mike Fitzgerald.
Oh.
And I'll tell you why, because I think he's a good designer, but he also has worked with a lot of other designers and companies, and he's really good at articulating what he does, why he does it, and he also plays a lot of games. He's just really good at talking about these things. He's easy to listen to. I mean, he is the co-host of Jeff's Ludology podcast.
Of Ludology, yeah.
So that is why I would pick him.
Yeah, okay, so that I was wrong. I'm going to take what I thought was going to be Tom's answer. I think listening to Eric Lang talk about design and actually get into his mind and thought process would be fascinating.
Well, he's probably my second choice.
He's such you could just see the gears working when you talk to Eric. And I know that he's often has to be so secretive about his projects. I would love it if he were in a situation that he could open things up and sort of get into the nuts and bolts of a particular design and talk about why he did things a certain way or why mechanisms work together in this way. I think that would be a fascinating class to be a part of.
Well, guess what, Caleb? We're only answering 8 of your questions. So the other 8 will be answered some other day. But we have a top 10 list to get to. But before we do that, we'll hit the sweet spot.
Now it's time to aim for the sweet spot with Glenn Flaherty.
Hi everyone, this is Glenn Flaherty from The Sweet Spot, and today we're going to talk about Ghost Hunters and Lost in Relay, two very similar games that are good to get to the table to open your night, to fill up time between other games, and everyone will understand it. I've played it multiple times, and everyone was like, well, we'll totally play it again. I don't know if you're going to build a board game night around it, but they're still fun games. So how does it play? Ghost Hunters, it's around $10, takes about 20 minutes to play, and it is kind of like a Uno plus Rummy plus a capture mechanic built in this like hobgoblin world where you're playing cards, you want your cards, they have pictures of monsters and powers and numbers, and you want the number you put down to be higher than the one before it. The powers, the cards can make people skip a turn, lose their turn. You can steal their card and stuff like this. It's part of an ongoing set of Ghost Hunter cards. The one I had, I believe, was called Monsters, but there's witches and stuff like this. And the different sets, like witches, have different powers and different colors. The artwork is okay. It's monochromatic, but it does elevate it above playing Uno or Rummy, or someone actually said Cribbage or Palace, those kind of games. Fun enough, easy to do. You can break that out. You can move to a game very similar but more elevated called Lost in Relay. That game's about $15. Comes in a really cool tin. But the issue with the tins, and it's not portable. I'm not going to put that in the back pocket. That's kind of like Uno, Rummy. Plus, there's this cascading power. So if you put down multiple of the same card, you're going to get the benefit of this, double, tripled power thing, where it behooves you to play many at once. Has terror-sized cards, really great artwork in full color. And for some reason, the characters in that game feel like they have more to do with the powers on the card. In Ghost Hunters, the characters on the cards have nothing to do with what they're actually able to do. Okay, now that's not to rip it. It has its place. Lost in Relay is probably more up my alley and more engaging because the artwork is so much nicer, but it's a higher price point and not as portable. Okay, so yeah, Ghost Hunters, Lost in Relay, 2 cool games. Check those out. Thank you so much, guys. Talk to you soon.
It's a Dice Tower Top 10!
The Dice Tower's Top 10 list is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.
I found that one of the best ways to recruit people to board gaming is inside the hobby itself. Collectible card games, role-playing games, those are like a wide source. And so many board gamers, I bet a lot of people listening to this show right now used to play role-playing games, and heavily.
Yeah.
And they moved to board games for various reasons. So these top 10 are 10 games that I would use to get people into role-playing. But when I was making my list, I found that there was like 600 kabillion games I could have picked.
Oh, yeah.
A strong theme is obviously one aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about... I think I made my list a little differently this time. I made my list almost in like the order I would use these games.
Interesting.
Like, hey,
Okay.
this is a... let's start with this one because it's the closest to a role-playing game and go from there.
So your number one would be like the easiest point of entry, you're saying?
Maybe. I think it's the one that's closest. I'm not saying that. And every person's different, right?
Right.
Everyone, you're going to be like, well, what role-playing game do you play? Oh, you play a horror one? Okay, I'll do this. You
Right.
know, and it depends what kind of things they like to do. Do they like to kick the door down, or do they like the storytelling?
Right. Yeah, I certainly tried to go for a nice array of, reasons why people would play an RPG and try and find some games that cater to that.
And then he picked the ones he likes the best.
That is what happened, yes.
All right, let's get started.
Rolling for initiative.
Number 10.
So let's kick things off with Cutthroat Caverns, which is a pretty straightforward dungeon crawl, except only the player who gets the final blow against the monster or trap or whatever it is you're facing gets the credit for doing so. So not only are you trying to defeat whatever's in front of you, you're also trying to mess with your opponents, mess with the turn order, and be the last one to hit that thing. So there's a lot of take that, a lot of zaniness, a lot of craziness. If you like the unexpected, Cutthroat Caverns is the game for you. My number 10.
My number 10 is Tales of Arabian Nights. This is pretty close, I think, to a RPG in a sense. It's like, here's some things. What are you going to do? Now, I mean, it's kind of close to actually choose your own adventure. But you have a whole lot of options that you can do here. Like, you meet a beggar, what are you going to do? Anything that you might have done anyway is probably included in those options. So it's kind of a focused RPG in a sense. But it's if you love the story, and the writing is really good. And I can say this because I'm reading writing in other games with storytelling, and it's like, none of these are as good as the Tales of Arabian Nights writing. Well, there's one game that has close writing. Eric will mention that a little bit later.
Tales of the Arabian Nights was literally my number 10 until I forgot one of my games and said, oh my goodness, that needs to be on there, and so it got bumped. So Tales was my number 11.
Well, tell us when that game comes up, because that curiouses me.
Sure.
Number 9.
Number 9 is Mage Knight. You are going on a quest, on an adventure. You've got a character with stats, but then you also have a sort of a deck maintenance aspect to this game. So this takes a little bit of the adventurous RPG aspect, but adds hand management and action points and stuff like that twist things into a more board gamey realm. Plus, it's a good bit of fun. Good adventure. Mage Knight, my number 9.
I'm not so sure on this one. Only because it's such a heavy game, and it's very much rules heavy, and the role-playing elements of it are very minor.
Okay. Well, this is more of the, if you like the figures on a map version of RPGs and, straightforward combat, this one might fit a little better.
All right, well, my number 9, we've already done it, so we're going to do it at a different time next run-through on Eric's list.
Sure, sounds like a plan. I'll catch up to you as soon as I'm done with my time points.
Number 8.
My number 8 caters to the puzzly aspect of RPGs. I don't really like combat if I'm in that situation. Like when we do the True Dungeon, we pick the puzzle run as opposed to the combat heavy run. And if you like escaping from things and want to relive that aspect of getting through an adventure, Escape the Room from Think Fun is a lot of fun. You get a small group together. You don't need that many people, maybe 4 or so, and solve some puzzles, look for clues, work together to escape the room, quite literally. It's a blast, and can't wait for the next edition of this, which I'm eagerly awaiting. Number 8, Escape the Room. Escape from Stargazer's Manor is the first one.
Yeah, I'm really excited about playing the second one in that series. Yeah, super, super cool. And I bet you we'll see about 10 of these games come out over the next year.
Probably.
My number 8's kind of a tie between Descent and Imperial Assault. It depends what you're doing, right? You're doing sci-fi Imperial Assault. If you're doing, fantasy Descent.
Right.
And essentially, this is a role-playing game as a dungeon crawl on a board. Now, it's simpler than a role-playing game, and it's basically kick the door down and, kill everything you see to some degree, but it's done really well. There was another game here that I thought was kind of like a role-playing game brought to a board game straight up, but Eric has that higher on his list, so we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But these two games are just kind of that, this is a role-playing game. We're just calling it a board game.
Mm-hmm. Descent made my short list. It's probably in the early teens.
Yeah, but you're not a huge Descent fan.
No, I mean, I've only played it once or twice.
Number 7.
My number 7, Tom alluded to earlier. This is Ryan Lockett's storytelling game, Above and Below. This one beat out Tales of the Arabian Nights for me because there's a little bit more control over the fate of your characters. Yeah, there's going to be some crazy stuff that happens to you when you go on adventures, but you put a party together when you decide to go adventuring. And you send these, 2 or 3 characters off, and based on how strong they are, what their abilities are, their strengths and weaknesses, you may be able to get around aspects of the story without having to roll dice or, work too hard. But if you don't plan very well and just send a couple people and hope for the best and you're rolling some dice and the story is going to take you in that direction, you have decisions to make, it has that choose-your-own-adventure aspect, and I think well-written as well. And I think it works a little, you feel like you have a little more control in Above and Below. But if you want that storytelling aspect of a role play, it's right here. Above and Below is my number 7.
My number 7, higher on Eric's list. We'll shuffle around and get to it later.
Cool.
Number 6.
My number 6 is for the adventurer in all of us. It's Lost Valley. One aspect of RPGs that I always like messing with is the inventory. You collect stuff that you can then hopefully use in a future situation. And Lost Valley is one of those where you can go to the shop and you can buy things, you can find stuff in the forest and load up your cart that will allow you to mitigate the problems that you'll run into as you search for gold in the valley. I just feel like it's got like a character sheet. I've got my little picture of my dude, and he's got this many spaces he can carry things, and you go off into the wilderness and have an adventure, hopefully find your fortune. Lost Valley, my number 6.
Yeah, again, there's so many games I could have put on this list. That's definitely a good choice. My number 6 is if you take every role-playing game in the world and put them in a box and shake it really hard. You get Duel of Ages. Duel of Ages or Duel of Ages 2. If you like storytelling, this game's going to really appeal to you. If you want to take Genghis Khan bowling, or if you want to have Annie Oakley fly a cruiser ship in the future, or Robin Hood throw a softball at some other, some futuristic robot, all this is possible. And if you're a big fan of the stories that games tell, this is certainly one to check out. That's Duel of Ages, my number 6.
Someday I'll try it, but maybe I'm lying that I'll probably never do that.
Number 5.
My number 5, Tom mentioned in its epic variant, in his number 7, that's Thunderstone. This is pretty straightforward dungeon crawl, fight monsters, build up a party, but it's a deck builder, and so you're working to maximize the efficiency of your deck and doing all those deck building things, leveling up your characters, which is always fun, and then delving into the dungeon, trying to take out monsters, and hopefully not having them smack you too hard. It's a neat game, and I usually, in fact, I've never played it in its epic variety where you mix everything together. I sort of like to pick just the few cards we're going to use for this game, a little more Dominion-style deck building for me. Here are our heroes, here's our weapons, and all that, and I'll just play straight through. Of course, I like the advance variety better than the original, but Thunderstone is a nice solid way to get some RPGers into the hobby. My number 5.
It doesn't matter, Eric. Now, before we get garbage everybody from saying we talk about a game that's out of print, they've announced Thunderstone 3rd edition is coming into print.
Ooh.
And this one has the epic thing built right into it, so...
Does it?
You're going to be forced to do it that way.
Oh, great. I barely worked through all my advance cards. Okay, yes.
Well, you don't, again, like I say every time, this 3rd edition did not burn your advance cards.
It doesn't cause it to burst into flames. Yes, I know.
It does not. So those who have Thunderstone, fantastic. And I think there is some backwards compatibility. I'm not sure. But for those complaining they can't get it, this is exciting news. And yes, and I think if you play it as the epic Thunderstone, it does feel more like a dungeon crawl and less like just straight up Dominion. My number 5 is Robinson Crusoe. I really like the storytelling aspect of this game. You're like, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to hunt things. I'm going to go out and build myself a shack. And there's all sorts of things you can do in this game. And what's really cool is the game has these decisions you make come back to haunt you later. Like I found some berries. I ate them. I feel great this turn. Well, see how you feel in 4 turns later.
Yes.
And I love that. I love that if you fight an animal and it runs away, later on it might come back in the camp and get you. And it's a really strong story game. And I am so excited about the upcoming Mars version at Essen. So anyway, my number 5, Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah, it's a strong game. And I had forgotten about the events that you trigger something and then this card shuffles back into the deck. And if it comes up again, it might not. But if it does, yeah, you're going to be hurting. And that's an interesting mechanism.
Number 4.
My number 4 caters to those who want a campaign, who want their game to evolve as you go. And it's not even worth harping on this too much, but we've mentioned once or twice a little game called Pandemic Legacy. The game changes, the rules change, the situation changes, characters live and die and get better, get worse as the game goes on. We just last week finished this with my wife and son, and looking forward to talking about this with Tom in the near future. We had a blast, and I think this would certainly appeal to those looking for a campaign-style game. Working together to save the world in Pandemic Legacy, my number 4.
What can I say here?
What can you say?
All right, my number 4 is Defenders of the Last Stand. I would have put Defenders of the Realm maybe, but I think Defenders of the Last Stand is, well, it's currently in print, it's cool, and it's post-apocalyptic, which is a RPG setting that hasn't really been touched by the other games. I didn't want to make it all fantasy.
Sure,
but Defenders of the Last Realm, you're defending the city, you're going around, you're fighting mutants all over the place, but there's also storytelling aspects of the game. You'll go somewhere, there's an adventure, and you'll flip a card over, and it'll say, do this, and have this adventure, and then it tells you the result of that adventure, and you're not going to use all these in every game. So every game you have these cool adventures you can do, which might actually distract you from winning the game. But it is a lot of fun, and I think the theming and storytelling in this one is the strongest of any of these games that are currently out and not currently being developed for the future, possibly.
But I think I followed what you just said.
That's right. That's Defenders of the Last Stand.
Number 3.
Number 3 showed up on Tom's list in the number 9 position, and that's Time Stories. You're working together, you're working through locations. It is very much a situational role. In fact, you take on a role. Not only are you a time traveler, but then you take on a persona of a character in this time period that you're traveling to, and trying to solve puzzles, work your way through the locations, get out, find out what's wrong, and solve the puzzle in Time Stories. My number 3.
Yeah, now, to be clear, it was number 9 because of the order I put these in, not how much I like these games, because I love Time Stories. And I was just talking today, Sam and Z, and we were talking about how we were really wishing that that there was another module out, because I'm getting a little antsy here. Need me some Time Stories in my life.
I see.
But it is a really strong story. Get to make decisions. I think a lot of role-playing people really enjoy it. My number 3 is Smash Up. Now we're starting to delve just into games. Smash Up's going to appeal to role players because you can, I think, have every single, what do you like? Tell me what theme you like, and I can almost guarantee you at this point it's in the game. Do you like sharks? I got sharks. Do you like robots? Do you like ninjas? Do you like dinosaurs? It's in the game. Greek gods. Oh, it's crazy. There's so much in this game, and you get to smash it all up and play against each other. A really fun Smash Up game. Smash Up.
Well, but I mean, is that aspect really, specific to role players or just anyone?
I'm not saying it's specific to role players, but this list was games to get RPGers into games, and I think this is a tantalizing one that they would come and play. I really do.
All right.
Number 2.
I actually struggled with my number 2 just a little bit. I adore it, and I think it certainly fits, but it's almost too close to a straight-up RPG, and that's the Pathfinder adventure card game. You're doing a whole lot of skill checks. You're acquiring items and using them most efficiently, helping out your fellow players. And it almost feels like it's pretty close to straight up Pathfinder, but it's got the deck building, deck maintenance aspect that does keep it firmly in the card game category. I love the system of this game, and it certainly will almost be a straight translation. If somebody plays Pathfinder, you show them this, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I know how to do that. Sure. Oh, yeah, I got a deck? I got stuff? I do skill? Yeah, sure, I'm in. Pathfinder adventure card game, my number 2.
Yeah, and that's why this one was down with Descent and Imperial Assault for me, because it's very similar to it.
Yeah.
I don't know how well this one would do for many role players, because they might actually sit there and go, this is so close, why am I not just playing Pathfinder? With the exception, you could play this solo pretty nicely.
Right. And I guess that there is the danger that, if you're going to play straight up Pathfinder, that probably is a more robust experience. And if you're that close, maybe this wouldn't have as much of an appeal.
My number 2 is Eldritch Horror. That's, the horror brings it to life. You gallivant all over the globe with other people. You're working together to stop evil. It's not super close to an RPG, but at the same time has a lot of the same aspects where you're rolling dice. You get to go on adventures. You're fighting Cthulhu and all his hellish minions. It's really entertaining, and there's a kabillion expansions. Actually, I think there's like 4, but that's a lot of content.
4
for
kabillion,
this game.
Whatever.
Eldritch Horror. Rounding.
Yes, the rounding error.
And finally, number 1.
All right, you knew this was going to be on the list, right? I can't do a role-play related list without jumping into Mice and Mystics. You get to take the role of a mouse or a lizard or some other small forest creature and go fight bugs and mice, or not rats, and cats, and work your way through the forest and cut down leaves and fly through rivers. And it is an adventure. It's got your stats, you got your weapons, your armor, all that stuff. Playing it on a board with your story that goes along with it. Campaign-based, cooperative. I love this game. Mice and Mystic, my number 1.
Yeah. I thought about this one, but you just like it a whole lot more than I do. I mean, I'd like it, but Eric loves it.
I love it.
All right, my number 1 is a tie. I'll probably give the win here to Lords of Waterdeep, but I also put Champions in Midgard. Champions in Midgard, what? Well, they're both very similar games in that there's worker placement and you're going off on adventures and doing things in Champions in Midgard. And in Lords of Waterdeep, it's just a worker placement game, but it has D&D on top of it.
Yep.
And so this is the ultimate thing. You get the RPGers to play these, and then the next time you bring out a game, you're like, hey, you want to play Manhattan Project? It's just like Lords of Waterdeep. Oh, you want to play this game? It's just like Champions in Midgard, and they're in. You got them. Hook, line, and sinker. The Vassal method.
Lords of Waterdeep was certainly on my short list. It's probably in the early teens. It's still in my collection because I like pulling out the character cards and going, ooh, I voiced him in a book. That's cool.
I'm sorry. Ding.
Nay, ding.
All right, let's see what our contributors think.
Mary Prasad, a.k.a. Dicey Chic here. Descent Journeys in the Dark is an excellent game to introduce an RPGer to board gaming. It has a lot of similarities to RPGs. It's a highly thematic dungeon crawl where one person takes on a similar role to the dungeon master in RPGs. The other players take on roles of heroes who go on quests, fighting monsters, collecting treasures, leveling up, etc. Characters have variable playing powers and attributes. The game may also be played as a campaign. I think a role player would very much enjoy playing Descent.
Hey everyone, this is Tim Jeanette the Metal Meeple, and from my experience, role players want to play something that's cooperative first. Now, whether it has a mastermind or not, that's up to you, but I believe that The Legend of Drizzt or Wrath of Chardalon or Castle Ravenloft, they're all the same game, the Dungeons & Dragons board games, but they tend to do really, really well with role players who haven't played a lot of board games. And that's just in my experience. So I'm gonna have to say the D&D board games.
Hey everyone, it's Mark Zielinski and board games for role players. Well, if you're going to be trying to make that transition, I'm going to suggest the D&D series that came out by Wizards of the Coast, that started with Castle Ravenloft, and then after that you can move into Wrath of Chardalon, Legends of Drizzt, and then finish up with the new one, Temple of Elemental Evil. I mean, basically, this is Dungeons & Dragons role-playing on a board, so it's a great transition, and then after that, you can open their eyes up to some other games and see how that goes, but, no better way to get them to play a board game than let them role-play on the board at the same time.
Hello, Broken Meeple here. As a role player myself once, I really got into games that were story-driven and highly thematic, and I still do now. So if I was going to do that for these days, I would pick something like Arkham/Eldritch Horror. Really good thematic sense to it. Great story from the cards that you get as encounters. They have their own character, they could role-play it to their heart's content. I reckon it would work really well from a horror perspective, particularly if they've played a horror RPG already. So Arkham Eldritch Horror would be my choice.
Hello, this is Ignacy Chivchek.
And this is Stephen Bonacore. We are Board Games Insider.
And in my opinion, the best game for the people who played role-playing games is a Descent. It is a game about dungeon crawling, killing monsters, and it's a cooperative game against the game master, actually. So it's a pretty much role-playing game on the board.
Good choice. I'm going to go with Battlestar Galactica, one of my favorite games. You're always getting into the roles of the characters in the game, and it just brings out that theme in a really great way.
Ronan and Sean from the Game Pit, my choice for an RPG player is Pandemic Legacy. People play RPGs for different reasons, but this has got a campaign, an ongoing story, character development, and also the co-op bit, which lots of people enjoy about being an RPG and part of a group with puzzles to solve. Sean?
Well, my one is all about the storytelling in an RPG game, and I think Time Stories really does do that very well. It solves clues, there's puzzles, it's all going on. It's a lot of the things that I enjoy in an RPG, and I hope that others would too. too. So my choice is Time Stories.
Captain Obvious.
This is Anthony from Board Gamers Anonymous, and for me, if trying to get a role player into board games, there has to be two strong elements. You need a lot of good mechanics, but you also need a strong story-driven element, and right now I think the best game on the market that does that is Above and Below. This game perfectly melds strong mechanics and this idea of building this village over time with these beautiful stories while going below and trying to explore these caverns beneath the village. It's a wonderful game, and there's a lot of strong story-driven elements here that would make any role player happy to continue playing.
Hey everybody, it's the Board Game Point of View, and if we're trying to get one of our friends who is a role player into board games, we're going to slap something with the D&D title in front of them.
Lords of Waterdeep.
Right? So this game introduces a lot of popular mechanics found in board games like worker placement, resource gathering,
Cards.
and little wooden cubes, an absolute staple of board gaming.
Rebecca and Hunter here from Family Showdown. If I were to convert role players to board gaming, I would use the D&D line of board games.
Yeah, the Dungeons & Dragons board games, the most recent one being Temple of Elemental Evil, use the D&D Adventure System rules, which are based directly off of the Dungeons & Dragons rules themselves. So the system will be very familiar with many role players, all wrapped up in a nice board game package.
Hey folks, this is Graham from the Four Corners of the Board. Which board or card game to get RPGers into board games? Well, I asked our resident RPGer, B, and he said go with the board game that is closest to the world that they RPG in. For B, he really enjoys the Serenity RPG, which is set in the Firefly universe, so he suggested the Firefly board game, as it has so much from that world it is easy to roleplay within the board game.
Hey, this is Paul Owen of Dice Tower News. The game that bridges the gap for an RPG player is Dead of Winter. It embodies thematic story building and role-playing at its finest. I believe that role players enjoy fleshing out a character and contributing to a story in pursuit of a goal. More importantly, it doesn't leave one foot on the RPG side of the fence the way Pathfinder card game or Mice and Mystics do. Role players can leave their magic swords behind and fully embrace the board game world represented in Dead of Winter.
This is Roy Caney from Epic Gaming Night, and for me, it's Eldritch Horror. Arkham Horror really got me into board gaming, coming out of role-playing games myself, so Eldritch Horror is like an evolution of that. You get to run around the globe collecting awesome items and upgrading your characters, cooperating as a team, and occasionally being devoured by an elder god. Eldritch Horror.
All right, so the people's choice, and thank you, contributors. The people's choice say Tales of Arabian Nights for number 10.
Yep. All right.
Number 9, Eldritch Horror.
Okay.
Number 8, Lords of Waterdeep.
Yep.
No surprise there. Number 7, Battlestar Galactica.
Yep. Bonacore said that, right?
He did. And again, this is one I considered. Any game where the theme is strong will probably work. 6, Time Stories. 5, Descent. 4, Betrayal and House on the Hill.
Huh, all right.
That is a pretty good long story into it, so great. And 3, Pathfinder. So, Eric, you've been validated. 2, Mice and Mystics.
Nice.
Double validation. And then number 1, Imperial Assault.
Yes.
So this is it. Tell us on our forums, go to our forums and tell us what you think would be great games to teach someone who is getting into RPGs. And, maybe utilize this. Again, I'm not saying that we're winning them from role-playing games, okay? I'm not saying I want to stop them from playing role-playing games. Role-playing games are fascinating.
They can play both.
Yeah, right. And I'm just saying, hey, if you like those, I bet you'll like these too. And almost always, it can happen. It can.
I mean, I know lots of role-play groups that, when the full group can't be there, they'll play a board game instead.
That's right. So, all right, folks. Well, once again, we want to thank you for listening. This is the last podcast, I think, of August. So until next month, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode number 472 was recorded on August 25th, 2016. Coming up next week, what game would you want to see played on TV? Find out what our contributors have to say. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. If a catastrophic event has turned your game upside down, find out how we can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom and me with assistance from Jason Thompson, Itai Perez, Eric Matthews, and Rob Searing. Fear of the Star of Highway to Heaven provided by Landon Dredd. Timothy Pinkham composed our theme, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games at great prices at CoolStuffInc.com. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network, including The Broken Meeple, Flip the Table, On Board Games, The Game Pit, The Party Gamecast, Board Games Insider, and Board Game University. Find out more at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. All right, so if there was a Dice Tower RPG, and you could play as various characters, what style of RPG would it be?
It would probably be a comedic one, like Cthulhu, where everyone goes insane at the end, but funnier. Right? You get shame points, but like, mispronounce the word. That's your weakness, Tom.
There you go. Yeah, I should start working on my character sheet right now.